Hello, can everyone hear me? Hello, hello. Um, hey, I have headphones in. Can you guys hear me? Okay, hang on one second. Okay, cool. So, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
good. I can. Yeah. A connection across the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've never done one of these before.
Oh, you haven't? I always
No.
get, I enjoy them because I feel like it's instant connection and that you get to mix and mingle with a lot of people and questions, but I always get really nervous, like, it's
Yeah. Yeah. Bit
live.
nerve-wracking.
But thank you so much for being here. I am a huge fan of your book, Once There Were Wolves. It, I could not put it down, and it kept me up until the final chapter, and I'm like smacking my husband, like, oh my god, it is
Thank you.
so beautiful and just so powerful with the characters and the landscape and the way that you're able to have a real primal feeling with these characters and the story and environmentalism and everything. I truly, I just love this book, and I know that our readers really loved it too. So, thank you, first of all, for writing it. And
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me today and for reading it. It's just so lovely of you.
well, thank you. You have just such a powerful way with words and your characters, and especially the landscape. I really got lost in the landscape of your books, and there's a couple of different places, locations, from all the way in Australia to Vancouver to the Scottish Highlands. Um, can you tell me a little bit about that and why the Scottish Highlands, and in addition to the inception of this story and why it takes place there? Why did you choose the Scottish Highlands?
Yeah, well, so originally I had imagined that I would set the book in America
Oh, really?
because, yeah, the kind of, I guess the initial idea came from when I found out about this beautiful ancient tree or forest, really, which is it kind of gets a mention in the book, but it's this it's called Pando the Trembling Giant, and it's kind of this beautiful big organism that's it's basically a whole lot of trees connected to the one big root system, and it's the largest and oldest living organism in the world. But
Wow.
human impact is causing it to die out. And when I kind of learned that one of the sort of perfect ways to bring this tree back to life would be to reintroduce wolves into that forest, I sort of had this kind of stroke of an idea that I knew I really wanted to write about that, and about the kind of pushback from the locals. But I think for me, America, I have never been to Utah, which is where that forest is. So it didn't feel quite right for me to write a book there. And I knew I wouldn't be able to get there in time to do it justice. Um, and then so I was researching around, and I've discovered that Scotland actually has this same exact problem where the forests are dying out, and they have killed off their wolf population, and it's causing their environment to really suffer. And, you know, I have Scottish heritage. I've been there. I've spent time there. It felt kind of aesthetically perfect for a slightly noirish, crimey sort of story.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it felt right.
Very cool. Well, I've never been to Pando. I've been to Utah, and I had no idea that existed there.
Yeah,
I just assumed it was in like the Sequoias or something in California. That's so interesting, and
yeah,
I love that you also reference Yellowstone and the reintroduction of wolves. That's one of for those of you who don't know, it's you can Google it. I think it's probably on every national parks sort of website or climate change, and you can Google it too, but it's one of the most beautiful visuals. I think someone put it with words and stuff, but just reintroducing the wolves and what that can do for climate change and for the landscape in general, and how important that apex predator is for the entire life cycle. I mean, of ecosystem. Exactly. It's so wild because for those of you who don't know, I'm sorry for those of you who do, but to repeat this, but just how amazing it is to introduce wolves to then have to eat the deer that eat the trees. And the problem is when there's too many prey without having the predator there, they eat all of the foliage, which then allows runoff and all kinds of flash floods and poor soil. And the introduction of an apex predator such as the wolf sort of keeps that all in check and in balance. And it even changes the way that the streams run and creeks run and the water system, and everything sort of finds a balance. It's so interesting that the apex predator, how it plays in your book, because there are almost two apex predators in a way. There's the wolf, and then there's mankind, which I find so interesting, in how they sort of mirror each other, and how you think one of them is the bad guy throughout the book, and then you sort of realize that it's within us in a way, like it's human, it's mankind. Can you speak a little bit about that and what that process was like, writing about that, and just your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you put it perfectly. I think one of the things that I really wanted to explore in this book was that idea that, the monsters are not necessarily what we think they are. They're sometimes, in this case, they're us. And I think I initially kind of came to this book from a place of real anger about what I could see happening, both, the harm that humans are doing, not just to the natural world, but and to the innocent creatures in the natural world, but to each other as well. So there's a through line in this book which centers around domestic violence, male violence against women, and I was kind of struck at the time by the prevalence of that, and the really shocking emergency that we're going through globally, and how many women are murdered by their partners. And so I wanted to do that justice. I wanted to write about the things that were making me angry and passionate, and I wanted to kind of give voice to that. And so that's sort of where Inti and Aggie's characters both come from, having suffered something like that. And I guess, that really plays into that idea that animals are kind of not the monsters we think they are. We have a terrible capacity for violence. But on the opposite side, we also have a capacity for huge generosity, empathy, and tenderness. And that's sort of where I wanted to get to with this book, to a place of that kind of gentle nature that the wolves show us.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that in the book you talk about mirror touch and T's how she has this mirror touch, and what I thought was interesting about it is how it allows her to have empathy for others, or if it seems that would allow her to have empathy for others by having that feeling, or sort of being inside another person, in a sense. What I found really interesting about it is that she almost had more empathy for the animal world rather than the human world. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, well, I think she's someone who, because she has such a heightened sense of empathy for everything around her, she kind of goes through a bit of a transformation, really. Even before the book starts, we look back on her as a child, and we get this sense that she's incredibly connected to people and very trusting, and kind of believes the best in them. And we kind of learn that she's gone through something terrible, that sort of shifts her perspective on the world and on people. And, you know, this is something that her mother has kind of taught her from a young age, that because of her mirror touch, she's sort of extra vulnerable, and, you know, she needs to protect herself from the harm that other people can do to her, and sort of toughen herself up. And so that's sort of how we meet her in the book, as someone who's really kind of taken that on and decided to, I guess, close herself off to that kind of incredible empathy, because it is a vulnerability for her. It's dangerous for her. But that's, right, again, that's the sort of arc of her storyline, is to realize that, you know, this condition that she has doesn't have to be a sort of a burden or a curse. It can also be a gift of connection.
Absolutely. And I love how you mirror the girls off of each other, and they sort of almost like flip-flop. You know, you can see that journey of the strength and the empathy, and how that evolves and changes throughout the story. What was your, if you have a favorite of the sisters, do you have a favorite? And was there one that was easier or more difficult to write about or write for?
Well, I mean, I love writing, in this book, I loved writing a kind of furious woman. It was very liberating.
I'm sure, especially now.
Yeah. So I loved writing Inti when she was kind of fiery and ferocious, and I loved writing Aggie when she was like that. But it was also, I mean, it felt important to kind of write the flip side of that, which was what happens to Aggie after this trauma. And you know, I think we tell, there are trauma narratives that we talk about, and that's that someone will become kind of hardened and toughened to survive. But there's also a trauma narrative that people can become sort of more vulnerable and more fragile, and that doesn't kind of get spoken about as often, and I think it is something that needs to be acknowledged. And so, you know, that was harder. It didn't come as naturally for me to write that sort of character or that response to something, but it felt important at the same time. So yeah, I would say, I guess I had more fun with the kind of fiery sides of them, but yeah, it kind of felt right to also be true to that sort of softer nature of them too.
Yeah, they almost seem wolf-like in a way, just the way that they are, that sort of tribe and that pack, and they protect each other, and that fierceness that they put on. That's kind of scary.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I like that. I like the parallels.
100. Yeah, I love that, and I love how you weave them so well in between, you know, just throughout your story. So beautiful. What made you want to write about wolves in the first place? Was it through that rewilding story in Utah, or were wolves something that you loved from the get-go?
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, I've always kind of loved them, but I've always sort of thought of them as these sort of slightly mythical, fairy tale-esque creatures. And it wasn't until I started researching for this project that I discovered, you know, their incredible power over their environments and over everything around them, but also their kind of beautiful individual natures and their sort of unique personalities. I found those quite extraordinary. You know, they have their own sort of adventures and stories and personalities, and you kind of can't help falling in love with them as soon as you learn about them. And so I really wanted to make sure that the wolves in my book kind of had that individuality, and that we would fall in love with them as characters, as well as the humans in the story. So, I mean, they're just, they're kind of amazing creatures, like endlessly mysterious and surprising.
Yeah, they almost became, I mean, people throughout the book. And I loved that you referenced them as numbers, not names, because I think in a way it really did separate them and make sure you're like, no, this is a wolf. Because you get really connected in the way that you write about them and describe them. What was the research process like for that? Like, did you immerse yourself in wolf language and study, or how was it? What did you do?
Well, I mean, I kind of you mentioned the Yellowstone Project, and that was a major inspiration for me. I kind of dove right into that whole world, and there's a lot of really fantastic kind of first person accounts from the people who worked on that project, and you can read all about them. They're wonderful stories and books, and that's kind of where I started to learn about these individual wolves. So there was a lot of reading, a lot of trying to figure out how I could possibly write from the perspective of a wolf biologist when I sort of started from a place of knowing nothing about them. I also went to Scotland for a research trip and kind of did a lot of roaming around and exploring the countryside and kind of trying to get a real sense of that space and what it would be like if there were wolves there. So it was fun. It was great research.
That's amazing. And this is a really stupid question, so forgive me. Are there wolves in Australia?
No, we don't have them here. The equivalent are our dingoes. So
oh, wow.
they're our only apex predator, and we have the same exact issue happening here. We're killing them off, and it's causing deer and kangaroos to kind of go rampant and really destroy the kind of
The landscape.
the regrowth of plant life, which is, it's a major problem. You can actually see if you look at on pictures online, there's this huge fence that runs down, I think it's in New South Wales, and it runs kind of along the edge of a whole lot of farmland in order to keep the dingoes out. But all the farmland is just dry, barren, kind of dust land, and then on the side where the dingoes are, it's lush and beautiful and green. So it's really obvious what's happening.
It's amazing. On a different note, I've been dipping my toe a bit into regenerative farming and just learning about soil health and how important animals are to our ecosystem, and once they die and decompose and everything that goes into all the things that we think are so gross and awful, but the importance of having them, like the vultures that eat the animals and prevent disease, and it's wild when that gets disrupted. And we're being able to see it now more so, and it's just becoming more prominent and a bigger problem. It's so crazy. And I think it's overwhelming for people often because it just, I think we look at it and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? How can I do something about it? And in reading once there were wolves, I loved that you also touched upon how it affects this small town and how people even in that town, like Holly and Inti, there's this moment where I think Holly was talking about little ways in which you can rewild just in your own backyard, which got my inner conservationist all giddy and excited because it's those small ways, and showing people what are those little ways in which we could do something to rewild, from growing our own vegetables to maybe conserving water or whatever it is, but just everyone's tolerance and temperature is so different. So I love that you touched upon that, which got me wondering, what are your ways that you rewild, or there's small things that you want to share with others that they can take away to sort of rewild themselves? Or
well, I mean, look, it's hard. I live in a city, so it's hard to kind of really go nuts with the rewilding, but we're kind of redoing our backyard at the moment in order to kind of bring the native birds and wildlife, bees, pollinators, things that kind of spread growth and regrowth. And then there's other kind of simple ways if you can't kind of do that. We're very mindful of what we buy in terms of, single-use plastics. We're very mindful about how we recycle, how we compost. We try to have very low amounts of waste. Other things like walking and riding bikes instead of driving cars. We just kind of, not everyone can do this, but we just got a hybrid car in order to kind of cut down our emissions. There's a lot of ways that we can kind of, make small impacts that all add up to big impacts. Other things like also that you wouldn't think of, like making sure that you're bank or your superannuation fund doesn't support fossil fuels and things like
Right.
that. Reaching out to politicians and just letting them know that we want to cut down our emissions, we don't want to support deforestation. There's so much that we can do. Donating to wildlife funds, animal protection funds, all that stuff is, does make a really big difference. But the major thing that we can do is vote for the people in power who will actually do something to kind of save this planet.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's well said. And I think those little things on our own make an impact, but we all have to do it collectively. And it's like you said, vote for the people that are going to fight hard for this planet. And try and make incremental changes while we can.
That's right.
What books are you loving lately? To change the topic.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I mean, I have to admit, I have just had a baby. So
I just read that. Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
So you're not reading at all.
No I'm not reading a huge amount right now. I'm trying.
Oh. No, you have plenty of time.
I am reading Sally Rooney's new book. And I can highly recommend a couple that I just finished. Laurie Frankel's 1, 2, 3 I really enjoyed that. That was very warm and kind of funny, and also tackles that idea of, I guess, what's happening to our environment and how it's impacting us. And I loved Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour, which is just also this kind of warm, loving kind of look at relationships. And I think that's what I'm gravitating towards at the moment, things that are sort of warm, a breath of sweetness.
Yeah. That's awesome. I remember when I had our babes and I could never watch anything that was particularly violent or sad, and because it was just too much. It was just so much stimulation. So anything with warmth and goodness and happiness and stuff is just so important. Yes. Oh, how old is your baby, if you don't mind me asking?
He is 6 weeks or 7 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Weeks. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I thank you. I can't believe you're here talking to me. I'm like, I'm sleeping.
That's so my pleasure.
You're really just starting like the sleep deprivation, and
it's very brand new.
Yes. Very exciting. Well, I don't want to keep you for too long because I'm sure you have to get back to your babe. But what else are you working on, and what are things that we can look forward to as readers?
Yeah, well, so I'm working on my new novel, which will probably go into the publishers. We'll go into the publishers next year. So it's a little while away for you guys to read, but it's what is it? It's set on a sub-Antarctic island, and it's about a family, a father and his 3 children who are kind of living there, and the sea levels are rising and kind of taking over their little tiny island. And a woman washes up on shore, and they have no idea who she is or what she's doing there, and it's kind of the mystery around that. But it's also sort of about, I guess, raising children in a dying world, and our responsibilities around that, and the idea of what we choose to save and why.
It sounds awesome, and and really important. Going back to families, and now that you are a new mom, do you feel that that's going to influence your writing even more so? Do you feel like even a bigger pull now with climate change to really make a bigger impact?
Definitely. I think it really kind of, I mean, for me, it puts things into perspective. And I'm not saying you need children to know know what's important, but I think it brings a certain urgency to things, and I know that, I guess that's where my writing will kind of sit for a little while now, just on that idea of what we're kind of leaving behind for the next generations, and what we've kind of got to do to help them.
Yes. Well, I'm I'm so appreciative for this talk, and I'm really excited to read your next book. And I just love how much you create a story that is incredibly important, something that we need to pay attention to, and also create such rich and beautiful imagery around it, and find characters that have such a great, beautiful love story that we can all sit with and relate to and follow along with, and weave in such important topics as well. So I'm so appreciative for you being here and
Thank
for your
you.
beautiful work. And if
Oh.
there are any last minute questions, let me know really fast. Let me see. Do you mind if I ask just a couple more
Of
from our
course.
audience?
Yeah.
Um, Jackie, the library lady, wants to know what made you include the parallels between the sisters and the wolves?
Well, I guess for me, I always like to write with a sense of everything being connected, especially when you're sort of fusing, I guess, multiple kind of plot lines through a story. You need them to resonate with the same thematic. So
Mhm.
it kind of made sense to me that there would be reflections and between the wolves and the people, you know, that it sort of makes the story feel whole and thorough in that way. And you know, you get more of a sense of catharsis at the end when it kind of all pulls together, and you get it. Yeah, you know, it's all been traveling in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pony Xavier's wants to know what gave you the idea to add the mirror touch to the story?
Well, it's something that I've kind of been fascinated with for a long time. I learnt about it many years ago on an NPR podcast, but it's also so I have a much milder form of synesthesia, which is just, you know, it's memories related to color and texture and shape. So I guess I've always been kind of aware of slight, you know, abnormal um, ways of seeing the world and experiencing the world. And so I knew as soon as I found out about this different type of synesthesia, mirror touch, that I wanted to write a character with it. And then this book kind of came along, and it felt really perfect because it was, you know, the book's fundamentally all about empathy, and that's sort of what I think this condition explores.
That's amazing. That's incredible, and it fits so well. It
Yeah,
fits so well with Inti and into the story. It was the perfect complement.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
great. Good, I'm glad it worked.
no, it's so beautiful. I mean, I keep stepping back to look at it and the details and all of the different ways that the characters grow and evolve, and it's really just stunning. Just each of them
Thank
are
you.
so different and just so thought out, and the gruffness of Duncan and being the
Yeah,
sheriff, and yet he's so empathetic, and his trauma, and everyone, you can just look at it and just see everyone is full of trauma, and it's what we
yeah,
do with that trauma and learn from it, and how we can give back with
yeah.
that knowledge. And it's
That's
very
a really
beautiful.
nice way to put it.
Well, you wrote it. um, it's just beautifully done.
Thank
Let me ask
you.
one more.
Mhm.
Everyone's just saying, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for the book. It's beautiful. Um, and let's see. Um, and I guess the last one uh, is, where is the best place to order your book? So maybe where's the best place that you would recommend in Australia? And
Well, anywhere. I mean, you can get it from get it. I would recommend getting it from your local bookshop,
yeah, but
rather
are there
than.
any local spots that you recommend?
Well, I mean,
I know it's
probably
kind of tough. Like
everyone can
we
buy them
have
from my
like,
local in
well, I mean,
Australia.
but like here we have like Book People, or there's what is the we use it all the time, where they give back to like local bookstores and such. I'm blanking on the name, but uh something what is it called?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always just love supporting local bookshops, over big corporations.
Yeah.
Um, but you can literally find it anywhere that you would find books. Yeah, it's
Sorry, I had to ask. They were asking, and
no, that's okay.
um, but yes, supporting local, and that
Yeah,
also contributes to environmentalism and supporting your community. And um,
yeah, that's right, totally. And I think you guys have got a bit of a supply chain issue over there at the moment. So things are
yeah,
taking a long time. So it
yes,
might be one of those things that you've got to kind of order in advance.
yes. But I'm sure your local bookstore will have it. So get on your bike
That's
and
right.
pedal on over.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again, and thank you for your beautiful words and your book, and thanks for taking time. I know what it's like having a 6-week old, so I am sure you are
Yeah.
slammed, so I don't want to take any more of your time, but thank you so much. I really
Oh, well,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to chat.
You too. It was. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.